Hello and welcome to episode 26 of the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap. Now, we're a little bit of a funny time today, and we're probably in a little bit of a funny setup. We just had a very busy day. I've been running around a bit crazy. I have been out this morning checking out the venue for AutoTalk Live, the proper big AutoTalk Live. Because this is the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap. Anyway, whatever. I'm going to play a video now, just giving you a very quick 2-minute walkthrough of the setup. While you guys are doing that, we'll chat amongst ourselves with Matthew, who's in studio with me today, and Graham, who is on a very busy yard. So let's chuck this a bit.
We discussed the craft beers that you sampled.
Pivotal point at the Little Creatures Brewery. That's the garden bar there, which we are going to have open. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a walkthrough of the venue for AutoTalk Live. So you can see here this giant hangar. Hopefully you can hear me. It's a little bit windy. Hey. We walk inside. We can have all the space available on the day.
Yeah.
So coming in here, this is the main room where we are going to have hopefully 300 of you to hear some fantastic speakers from the auto industry and beyond. Finding out some really great strategies, some really great information on how you can run your business better. Now, when you arrive in the morning, you probably want to start your day with a coffee. So we have a barista coffee station over there. There's going to be another barista coffee wagon outside.
Havana coffee
for the during the day, for certain moments, we might have a little few drinks available there, and definitely in the evening we will have the open bar from about 4:30 through about 6 o'clock. Now that's going to be fairly broad: wine, beer, spirits. We know people like the odd spirit, and of course there'll be alcoholic options and coffee around if that's your thing. We're not going to have pizza on the day, but there will be an amazing array of food set up at stations over there, all in takeaway boxes, so you can grab it, go out, sit by the seaside, hang out in the back bar if you want to, which is over the other side behind that bar, enjoy yourself. Now the speakers will be coming from up here on the stage. We're going to have big screens in place so you can see what's going on, and make sure you don't miss any of that information that is going to be just so helpful. So yeah, that's a really quick walkthrough of the venue. Don't forget, buy your tickets now, autotalk.co.nz/live, and we will see you on November 11.
Right,
Richard, my first thought is you must think us dealers are in a bunch of coffee-swilling alcoholics, but
no.
Well, there's nothing wrong with coffee. It has very positive health benefits, and at the same level, we're always being told to relax. What is wrong with relaxing with a nice beer at the end of the day, or in my case, a Coke Zero and bourbon? That's what's wrong with that? These are all healthy, good things.
Absolutely nothing.
Sure.
It's going to be a good day. It's going to be a really good day. And look, I've been talking to a number of people around the traps about this, and there's quite a bit of. I'm not going to use the words excitement, but this is the first, I think, really decent event for the trade in general that's been put on in post-COVID times, where the industry from all different walks or aspects of the industry can come together, have a really good day out, networking, yes, just time out with the team, hear some really good speakers, get some good ideas, and just generally, I think, actually celebrate the fact that we're in business past all this muck of the last couple of years. And celebrate what we do. We do really well with a bunch of other people who also do it really well. And so I'm quite excited about that.
Yeah. Now you'll be pleased to know, Graham, we had the meeting this morning, that's why I was there with the AV people. We're getting those little headsets that the pop stars wear when they're singing on stage. I figured we'd want our hands free, because I want to be able to present with a tasty Havana coffee in my hand. I mean, I don't know about you, but I know what I'm fueled by. So anyway,
you're selling it.
Let's move on to something we've been up to this week. That's Matthew and I, and that's that we've done. And I know this isn't usual AutoTalk stuff, but I think it's interesting if we discuss it. And that is an electric vehicle four-way shootout. Now, this is for our publications, EVs and Beyond, and Fleet Talk. If you don't check out those, do go and have a look at them regularly. There's still some great stuff for the trade in there, even though they are probably slightly more consumer-focused titles. So we took out 4 cars, so quite a big project, testing the MG ZS EV, the all-new BYD Atto 3, the new-to-market SsangYong Corando Emotion and the trusty Hyundai Kona Electric back to back. And yeah, with some interesting results from that. One of them being that I think for most of us, the SsangYong was a bit of a surprise package.
I kind of forgot that it was coming here. I remember writing the story last year or the year before that SsangYong had confirmed it, and it kind of slipped into the back of my mind. We've had a lot of talk, obviously, about the BYD, about other manufacturers coming to New Zealand, and then this. I didn't even know you had it until a couple of days before the event. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Very compelling product.
Yeah.
Very compelling.
And an interesting thing too, in that probably our favourite vehicles weren't necessarily the ones that went the furthest either. A lot of talk about EVs is about how far they can go and about the range. And sure, the Kona is brilliant. I mean, on our mass, the Kona can go not that far short of 500 kilometres on a charge. On it, we did an urban-rural kind of mix. The SsangYong on our stats probably wouldn't do 300, but for day-to-day life, it was fine. It has way more space than the others. And get this, Graham, it can tow.
I'm going on a 1,000K road trip on Sunday. I'm leaving home at 12:30 in the morning. We're going to do about 1,100 Ks, I suspect, and back home about 10, 11 o'clock at night. Would it do that?
No.
No, it's true. I actually am. And first of all,
horses for courses.
Guys?
If you want to jump on the YouTube EVs and Beyond YouTube channel this week, actually, there's a video up where I did 1,400 kilometers in 2 days in the long-term BYD 803 we have, and that did that with pretty darn well. It has a couple of extra hours of charging in the trip, but the entire fast charging bill for the trip was, I think, $125. Versus if you were to go and do 1,400 kilometers at, say, a non-hybrid, non-electrified SUV of the same size, you'd be looking at about $350 worth of fuel. So it's quite a big difference there. But yeah, there's sacrifices to make. But anyway, that was the interesting one. Your winner?
Oh, it's funny because I had a winner in my head, and I talked to Robert Barry, and he had a winner in his head. And both of us, well, I rephrased the question, what would you actually buy? And we named a different vehicle each time. So I think early days, the BYD is probably the car of the bunch. But that SsangYong is really impressive for the money. It's not very pretty at all. But
its mother could love it.
No. But it's basically a Toyota RAV4 sized car competing against Yaris Cross sized cars that are the same price.
Yeah.
It's so much
the
more.
BYD is a bit bigger than that. Yeah. The MG, I think, is still a great all-rounder for most people, particularly those who are city-based. I think it's probably the best outright drive of them all.
Yeah.
Probably the best steering, all that kind of stuff. The Kona, I can see why fleets have it. It just goes the distance without causing any troubles, and that's probably important when you're putting staff who aren't necessarily as into the EV thing as enthusiast buyers are. So, yeah. Right, we'll jump into our next issue, next thing while Matthew goes and closes the door.
My winner was none of them because you guys didn't invite me. I mean, I must be the West Auckland cynic.
Well, you wouldn't have been paid, Graham.
And?
We'll bring another. We're going to line up another road trip soon. I've got an electric van with like 8 seats coming in the next few weeks. Maybe we should plan something with that, eh?
Oh, you got me at van. I'm a van man.
A Mercedes van, Graham. Graham and I have a thing with Mercedes vans. It's a long story. Anyway,
there's a lot of fear. It's man love.
The MIA has issued a scathing response to motorcycles being hit by the Clean Car Standard. Now, we actually reported this before the MIA has come out with this back in the last issue of AutoTalk. The Motor Industry Association has labelled it incredulous that motorbikes are set to be impacted by the Clean Car Standard measures imposed by the government. In a statement issued earlier this week, the MIA said it was surprised to learn that January 2023's new Clean Car Standard measures and penalties are set to apply to any importer of a road-going motorcycle. So if we just quote their policy well-known legend, I guess, Mark Stockdale, it all comes down to interpretation of the Act and whether the section on the Clean Car Vehicle Standard only applies to light passenger commercial vehicles or all light vehicles. The problem is that under the Act, any importer of a light vehicle has to set up a CO2 account and record the CO2 emissions of all light vehicles they import before they can be registered, which includes motorcycles and potentially electric bicycles, even if they aren't subject to penalties or credits. The MIA was under the impression the Act only applied to cars, SUVs, utes, and vans, and was encouraged us to recently learn from officials that all importers of light vehicles have to be set up with a CO2 account by the 1st of December 2022. What makes it more farcical is that motorcycle importers can't obtain CO2 data for their motorcycles, so they can't enter any data in the CO2 account, and they have no CO2 targets under the Act anyway. It's all a pointless exercise and a mistake in the drafting of the Act, which will put motorcycle importers to unnecessary extra work. What with the rollout of the clean car discount causing issues for used car importers in particular, this mistake will create new problems for both new and used motorcycle importers and other vehicles which are also meant to be exempt, like special interest vehicles or low volume vehicles. What is there to say about this other than that?
Are you surprised?
This is what happens when you rush legislation, and it's kind of one of those cases again where people had to, where the Labor was so keen to get it through, they didn't stop to get the legislation sorted correctly. And when you do that, I mean, other parties and other groups can't support it, even if maybe the intent is right there. It's just been badly written in a hurry by, I suspect, people who didn't have the experience to do it. But that's a totally separate issue.
No, I think it's actually a really important issue, I think, Richard, that you're bang on the money, but there's two different pathways. It's either been written by people that are not either have an understanding of the industry, so they're pardon me if you're watching, policy wonks or bureaucrats whose job is to write policy. This week it could be policy around vacuum cleaners. Next week it's around cars. They're just consumable items. Or it could be that there's an underhand at work here, that the people crafting this legislation know exactly what they're doing. And as we saw with some of the sneak-ins that occurred last year with regard to the used import vehicles that carried a fee, that the devil's in the details, and you don't often know the details until it's already too late. That the MIA is bang on the money. It was never the intention. It was never the intention broadcast during the very short windows of consultation, where it was effectively a case of, well, we're doing this. You can either support it or not support it, but we're doing it. Great consultation. Or it was just this glaring error created at a bureaucratic level. But I think the industry has got every right to be really upset at every level by the way this dog of a piece of legislation has been rushed through. And Minister, if you are watching this, goodness knows that you mightn't be, but if your officials are watching this, listen to the industry. We're telling you time and time again, we can't support stuff that's so badly written. It's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong to be asking us to comply with legislation that just doesn't work. Take the time to step back. Yes, you lose a few political points along the way because it doesn't come out when you said it would. It's a bit like Kiwi Bill, really, isn't it? But stop. Work with us. Well, Richard, how it is, right? I think we all got a right to be really upset by this.
I'm gonna put this out there, Michael Wood or your team. I'm more than happy to sit down with the minister. I've had a brief chat with him before and run through a few things. And I'm very much in between things. I have a stake in the industry, but also I'm very pro electric vehicle. So I think I can see both sides of the fence and give you some honest feedback. I think the issue with this is not so much that motorbikes have been included. I mean, potentially anything that burns fuel should in the long run be included. I mean, maybe we'll see trucks included at some point if you're going to do this properly. But the issue being is that this has come up at the last minute. And when we put it to the minister's office, they were really vague on whether they even realised if that was the case and that officials would work through it, so on and so forth. Well, that's fine until we are now 2 months away from when you need to have your account set up, pretty much. 2.5 months. So, we believe the NCTA is going to come out with more guidance on what people need to do soon. We are working with some people on the outside around that, and we'll certainly keep a close eye on it. But yeah, just crazy. Now onto a totally separate subject. The venerable Mitsubishi ASX, the car that seems to keep on going for Mitsubishi Motors New Zealand, and still sells despite the fact it's been on the market for
since the dinosaurs were on the earth,
10 years or something like that. Its future may be in doubt after the brand revealed a next generation iteration of the model based on a rebadged Renault Captur. According to overseas reports, the model is set only to be sold in Europe, not including the UK. So I guess that means left-hand drive only. In a brief statement to AutoTalk, a Mitsubishi New Zealand representative said they could not confirm the model for local sale. We are currently in discussions with our parent company regarding the options for our market, but we have no updates to share at this time. So what are the rumours around this, Matthew? Are you...
Well, there's rumours, obviously, that they may tap Nissan for some sort of Qashqai-based replacement, a little bit like, obviously, we have an Outlander that is tied with a little bit to the X-Trail, Nissan X-Trail. But it is... I just think it's really fascinating because the ASX is an incredibly good-selling vehicle here. I'm sure that it will continue on in some capacity. I did wonder if for a second whether the Eclipse Cross fills the void of the two models in a sense over time. Obviously, we've seen the Eclipse Cross become so much more popular with the plug-in aspect of that model. But yeah, I would have thought we would have heard a little more by now, other than, hey, maybe something's coming in the future.
My suspicions of this is that it's an emissions thing and that the current ASX doesn't meet emissions requirements in Europe anymore. Hence why they're keeping the UK out of it. And at this end of the world, essentially, the current car or a replacement via the Qashqai will come eventually, will cover it off. But for now, they can keep trundling along the current car at its current emission levels in New Zealand, Australia, Thailand, Japan for a couple of years to come. They don't have and the UK, they don't have the rush to do it like they potentially do in Europe. I think that's what's at play here, and I think we will see a replacement based off the Nissan Qashqai, the Nissan Kicks, something else like that. Graham, any thoughts? I mean, the ASX is starting to become a little bit popular out of Japan as well.
Yeah, they are. They are.
The RVRs, I think
they're actually not a bad product either. One of the little secrets about them is they're not bristling with the latest in terms of technology. Certainly not design anyway. I mean, for the consumer that walks into the dealership, a brand new car is a brand new car is a brand new car. We all know that. But the ASX, to be honest, it's a really old design. But sometimes old is good. And one of the reasons the ASX works really well is it works. And it works well, and it's proven, and it's a bit like Grandpa's X, I suppose. We got change bits and pieces here and there, but it's still an ASX. And I think it's done very well in the marketplace in New Zealand, despite all those different things. And it goes to show that Kiwis don't necessarily need the latest shiny thing. They just want good, solid, dependable product. And I'd say the ASX fits that bill. So we'll be sorry to see it go. Yes, they are available in Japan, and I suspect that'll be the source market to go to for quite some time if it's dropped out of the range here to fill quite a unique little void.
I don't see it dropping from Mitsubishi. My personal thing, I don't see it dropping Mitsubishi's range because I think one thing we've got to realize now is that for some brands, we are more tied to Thailand than we are to Europe. And if a vehicle is going to keep selling in Thailand or Southeast Asia or Japan, it'll keep coming here. The proviso being that they can make it work in regards to emissions. I haven't looked at the emissions on that car, but maybe emissions could kill it here. I doubt it would kill it in Australia. So, yeah, interesting move there. Now, VIA has appointed new board members, or sort of new board members, because they're fairly familiar faces to the organisation. Nichibo Japan Trading Company Managing Director Robert Young and AutoHub Managing Director Frank Willett. I think that's a new title for Frank as well. I think he's gone from Chief Executive to Managing Director. Have joined the Imported Motor Vehicle Industry Association, or VIA. It's not called the Imported Motor Vehicle Industry. It's just VIA these days. I didn't write. Oh, you didn't write this one. Okay. Who do I need to slap around? If anyone's listening in the office, then just sort it out. Their appointments have been confirmed by VIA, which says the two are replacing Sean Stevens, who resigned from Vehicle Inspection New Zealand, and I believe is now at the MTA. After 7 years. I personally believe we're very lucky to have two people, Young and Willett, with such an expansive knowledge of our industry, join our board, and I would like to thank them both for volunteering their time, says board chair Chris Stevenson, who is from CFS Finance and Enterprise Motorcars. So we've got... I'm just going to screw that up.
A brief technical interlude, gentlemen.
Yeah, no, I'm just reading the notes that are here. You think these are good additions to the board there, Graham? You've had a lot of experience with VIA over the years. What do you think of these guys coming on board?
Well, this is Frank's second tour. because Frank was a member of the national executive for many years, as you probably know as well, and in actual fact was the vice chairman of the VIA board for a number of years. So this is just back into the same old seat for Frank, I suspect. Yeah, and look, Robert's obviously got decades of experience in the industry as well, and sort of the face of Nichibo here in New Zealand. So look, I think they're good fits. I think what it does, probably more to the point, it just puts a balance amongst the board for the major players in the industry, major competitive players in the industry. So you've got representation now from all the major supply chains into New Zealand sit on that board, and that probably therefore allows there to be, I guess, real consensus decision making. So you haven't got the spectre, if you like, of some commercial favoritism occurring, or it just keeps things nice and easy and balanced. And yeah, people are at the core face of the export industry out of Japan.
Mm-hmm. I think the interesting thing too is this is a board that has to kind of shepherd in a new chief executive as David Vincent begins his retirement, semi-retirement departure from the role, and that will be a big task for them to undertake, I imagine.
Yes.
Now, sorry, Graham.
No, I'm finished.
Uber to phase out petrol cars by 2030 in the US and Europe. Uber CEO Dara
Have a go.
Khosrow Shahi.
I thought it was Heavy. Sorry.
Yeah. Has confirmed the firm plans to bar its drivers from operating on the app with internal combustion engine vehicles by 2030 in the US. The ICE ban will cover the United States, Canada, and Europe, with Uber drivers in New Zealand and Australia expected to be given a longer reprieve. The more electric cars we have in a particular market, the more the waiting times come down and pricing can come down as well. He told CBS, because I'm not saying the name again. The momentum is great, but most of the work ahead of us, work is ahead of us, not behind us. So at least he's acknowledging there that it's going to be a big job. There's already incentives, I believe, for Uber drivers around the place. I think they get way lower fees, even in New Zealand, if they drive an electric car over a hybrid car. And I kind of see this as quite a positive move for them, as well as I think perhaps the broader industry, in that taxi drivers and Uber drivers were always early to fuel-saving technologies. I mean, it used to be that taxi drivers bought a heck of a lot of hybrids, and it makes sense that they have a heck of a lot of electric vehicles. And if we're talking about air quality improvements, having electric vehicles stepping up from already pretty darn clean, mostly Toyota hybrids, is a great thing. These are cars that do a lot of mileage. There are cars that do a lot of mileage in close spaces. And I think if Uber can help their drivers move along into that space, then great. My suggestion to Uber would be, and they're probably doing that in America and others, is assisting in financing these vehicles. EVs do make, I think, for mileage like this, and I've actually owned a taxi company previously, a massive advantage, a massive benefit, just purely in regards to cost and how much money you can make as a professional driver. But the capital to get into them is so much higher. So potentially things like subsidized loans or assistance with getting into those loans so drivers can get them, even in places like New Zealand, I think would go a long way towards moving forward those vehicles into onto the road. Graham, you sell a few hybrids to taxi drivers. You're probably going to tell me no.
Yeah, we do, and I've got a different take on it. I don't. Once again, I have issues with this sort of thing. I mean, if Uber just encouraged its drivers rather than saying thou shalt, I always hate the thou shalt bit. End of the day, like you said, Uber aren't the ones writing out the checks for these things. So the poor old Uber driver, and so you take New Zealand, for example, we sell a lot of cars to Uber drivers, and they are usually on the thin edge of the financial beam to get themselves into a car that qualifies in the first place. They're not wealthy people. That's why they're driving for Uber usually. And so the price differential between an average hybrid vehicle, let's say the spend is $15,000, $16,000 for an Uber qualifying hybrid car, and stepping up into a EV that's going to have perform the same role, the financial gap, the burden for that is immense. And they're usually financing. If they're not financing with us, they're financing off family or friends or the bank of wherever. And it's a bridge too far. I've got a good friend of mine in Oklahoma City who you might have actually met, Richard, who drives for Uber as his job in between storm chase season. That's what he does. And I know for a fact he is not going to have the wherewithal to step up that vehicle if he carries on driving for Uber. Now, I know it's a few years away, but as a good example of that, Uber's effectively dictating to their drivers what they need to be in without giving any particular thought to the financial consequence of the average driver's pay packet.
In fairness, we don't know that. I mean, Uber's saying they've got work to do. I mean, potentially they are looking at it in other ways, and maybe there are other models they could look at. I remember when Ubers first came around, and all these Uber drivers needed relatively late model hybrids, and there were dealers and companies popping up that were subscribing people into hybrid cars to allow them to drive Ubers. I mean, perhaps we could see similar strategies here.
Yeah, but it's all a cost. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you fund it; it's an extra cost.
I think people forget though. You've got to look at the other side of it. I try and talk to my Uber drivers about their business model, the cars they're using, just typical industry stuff when I'm in an Uber, and some of them talk about spending like $400 a week on fuel. Well, that's a heck of a long way to find. That is the payment for a Model 3, or more than the payment for a Model 3.
When's the road user charge going to come on their driving, Richard?
Eventually, but even then, it still won't be enough. I would have suggested to break that metric by too much.
I mean, I don't feel like Captain Negative on this sort of stuff. And again, I say that I'm not, but I always look at things on a little bit of a different playing field, perhaps. We're just not factoring in things like the eventually road user charging, and it may be a combination of that and road pricing as well. We don't know what the final model is going to be. But in terms of funding our roading system through road user or fuel excise, which the petrol is currently not so much paying for, but EVs are certainly not. It's a game of kick the can. At some point in time, we have to pay it. And these are additional costs that we need to factor into the bigger picture on our electric vehicle fleet that we're just not doing yet. And for the poor old Uber drivers, for example, if you're going to sort of try and upsell them into that as a means of saving fuel, well, it's not going to quite be as rosy as that if you're trying to work it out on a weekly overall spend. And I'd argue that most of your Uber guys that are running hybrids right now, they'd be the most successful Uber driver in New Zealand if they're spending $400 a week on fuel. That's an extreme.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah, that's true. Right, anything else on the list, Matthew? Or are we kind of at the end?
We're towards the end, mate. We're nearly there.
Oh, we are at the end. There's nothing left on the sheet.
One more, snuck it in.
I did include the prompt. What's the most extravagant Uber car you've ever been in? We've all been in Priuses, we've all been in Aquas, but what is the strangest car you've ever been picked up in?
I've been Ubered in a Mercedes-Benz long wheelbase S-Class.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nothing I've got tops that. Graham?
I'm going to say I have been in it might have been an X5, but I'm going to just wind the clock back a second and remember that in Auckland City a few years ago, there was a famous taxi driver for Auckland Co-op taxis. He had a Commodore SS, and then he upgraded to a Club Sport. And he was like the famous taxi driver around the ranks. And everyone said to him, there was actually a piece in the Herald, I think, said, what on earth are you doing driving this? And he said, I like driving. He said, I really like driving. I just do this as a part-time thing for myself. It's a bit of extra income. And sure, I spend money on fuel. He said, but unlike the guy over there, and he pointed to somebody in Canberra, he said, I actually enjoy every K that I do. And I thought, got a good point.
Remember how firm the suspension was in those Club Sports. I'm not sure as a passenger I would be enjoying it quite as much.
I had a friend
no mobile rating system at the time, Richard.
I had a friend who used to run a small little taxi company out in West Auckland, and I should not name names, but they had a C33 Laurel in their books long before they should have just pushed it into the end of the Manukau Harbour Bridge with done about 300,000 Ks. The diff had done 400,000 Ks, I think. And we were going to the airport one day, early morning run to Japan, and we couldn't hear ourselves as they go all the way down the motorway. So I think anything's an improvement on that. But yeah, nothing.
Actually, the two other Uber stories. The best Uber I've ever had, probably better than the S-Class, was I was on a trip up to Japan for work. Well, we went for work and pleasure. I proposed to my wife there, went on a little trip to Thailand, they came back for small meetings before flying back home to New Zealand. And I got food poisoning at the end of the Thailand trip. And we flew back into Haneda, and I was feeling very, very, very sorry for myself. And I did not like the idea of catching a train from Haneda to Ueno, where we're in the north side of Tokyo, where we normally stay. And so I Ubered. We'll collect an Uber. And an Uber in Tokyo on that day was a brand spanking new Valfire luxury armchairs, leather, the lot, and that was very good. And the other Uber story I have was actually when I was traveling with you, Graham, and we were in Oklahoma City.
I was just going to bring that story up.
And this was in the early days of Uber, and Uber in Oklahoma City in those days, and Uber was obviously trying to buy some market share, was so cheap. The day before we flew out of Oklahoma City, we wanted to go do a few things. We called an Uber. We worked out it was so cheap, we could actually just keep the Uber. And we'd keep the Uber, and we went to Walmart, and we went to get frozen custard.
Frozen custard in Norman. It was about 40 miles away. Yeah. And he's kept on saying to us, oh, do you want to go further? But wasn't that the guy that was talking about, hadn't he done jail time or something? He'd done time for something like that. But anyway, his ex-wife had been shot or something, or murdered his ex-wife, or there was just all these stories.
We kept this Uber for about an hour and a half and gave him a big tip at the end. But I think the actual Uber bill itself was all of about $30. It was so handy because we had all this luggage, so it just stayed in the boot. We sat there eating our ice cream while he's sitting out there in the Uber. He was happy because the clock was the meter was ticking. I guess he didn't get that much work, and we just were happy to keep him there. So it was.
Pretty bad his ex-wife, though, right?
Sorry,
I said pretty bad his ex-wife, though, right?
I can't remember the specifics of his crimes, but
he'd done some good time. I think there was a story behind that too. But yes, good on Uber.
I'm not sure he'd passed the test for a P endorsement in New Zealand. Put it that way.
Possibly not. No.
This was in the days before I think even Uber before Uber had an issue with drivers killing riders. It's very early days of Uber. And
Oklahoma City as well. Have you ever been to Oklahoma City and got out of the airport? Can have its sketchy days. It was in a rather well used Infinity, and when I say Infinity, it was a Maxima with an Infinity badge. So anyway, that's dragged out far too long. Thanks everyone for joining us. We should be back at the normal time next week, and don't forget to like, subscribe, all this kind of stuff. Go to autotalk.co.nz/live and buy your tickets now. Please do. We're seeing a lot of activity. If you aren't quite filling in the forms, get it done. And Graham and I, and maybe him, will see you there later.